Welcome to the ALCTS webinar on how to host a Preservation Week event. I'm Felicity Dicus, a member of the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our presenter today is Danya Khan. Danya is an independent consultant for small and mid-sized cultural heritage institutions. She has worked in the fields of conservation and preservation for almost 20 years, specializing in book conservation and preservation training. So she brings a wealth of knowledge to this topic. Jessica Bitely from the ALCTS Preservation and Reformatting section will facilitate our questions and answers portion today. So just a few reminders about today's logistics. All audience members are muted. If you have questions or comments, and we hope you have lots, please type them into the question box on your screen. Today's webinar doesn't have interactive chat capabilities, so if you wish to chat among yourselves, you can use Twitter, and here's the hashtag on the screen that you'll use. We don't monitor that feed, so please remember to use the questions and answers box to communicate with Danya. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with links to the recording, the slides, and an evaluation within a couple days. And now, here's Danya. There'll be a slight delay as we change speakers.
Okay, thank you everybody, and while I jockey around and get just a brief presentation going here, I just wanted to welcome all of you, and I hope you have lots of questions. So what we're really going to be talking about today is how to host a Preservation Week event, and it's really hard to do one of these webinars to be able to answer everybody's questions, because these are such unique events to your institution that, of course, I can't cover everything in an hour. That's why we're doing this special question and answer event. So for those of you who may have watched the recording of the webinar that we did back in February, of course, the dates for Preservation Week aren't accurate anymore because we'll be going into 2015. So for 2015, Preservation Week is April 26th to May 2nd. Now just remember that you don't have to do something during Preservation Week. It's a good way to work with other institutions and promote preservation, but if that's a really busy time for your institution, feel free to do Preservation Week events any other time of the year. Please feel free to call it Preservation Week, but as always, we just really recommend, whether big or small, you do something. So April 26th to May 2nd, 2015. So for those of you who watched the webinar, and maybe for those of you who didn't, here is just a really brief recap. If you haven't done a Preservation Week event before, start simply and build on your successes each year. So you might just do a Twitter feed, you might do a blog post. Start simply, and then you can build up to having one presentation in a year, and then maybe if you're really ambitious, you can do an entire week's worth of activities. This all really depends on your institution, the size of the institution, the audience you're trying to reach, and of course, how many people you have to work on these events. Preservation Week does have an event toolkit. Please utilize it. It's there to help. Those of us on the committee who created it really tried to think about what all of you may need, and so we tried to put everything up there. If there's something you need that you think would be very helpful for an event toolkit, please let us know. We're more than happy to put up more information because we really want it to be a useful tool for you. Okay, remember, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. If you don't know what you want to do with Preservation Week, go and do a quick Google search online. What are other people doing? What have they done? It's a great way to get inspiration. Do you have to do exactly what somebody did? No. But it's a really good way to get ideas that can then feed into other ideas. And don't forget to advertise widely. Okay, don't just put up flyers in your library or in your archive or in your museum. Have the talk to your local newspaper. Have them write up maybe a little article, put in an ad. Try to really broaden who gets the information about this program so that you can bring new faces into your library or into your museum or archive. For those of you who watched the webinar, I thought I'd bring up some examples of events that were done in 2014 instead of in 2013. So the New York Academy of Medicine just did a blog post, you know, some helpful ideas on what, you know, you can do to celebrate Preservation Week and helpful information for other institutions and the general public. That's something very simple. The University of North Texas did kind of a combination of events. They actually tapped into the free Preservation Week webinars that we do each year, and that's a great way to get started, especially if you're in a location that doesn't exactly have easy access to speakers. It's a great way to really have a good event for very little work on your part. These are all free and streaming events, just like you're watching now, and they're always really good. They also, though, UNT also complemented those webinars with programs of their own, with their own people. So they kind of brought their own personal touch on the days when Preservation Week wasn't doing a webinar. Baylor University has Preserving Your Family's Heritage. They focused on storytelling. Now, this isn't necessarily a Preservation Week program, but this is where you can search and go, oh, even though that's not an official ALA Preservation Week program, it's preserving our cultural heritage. It's a great idea. You know, it's a great idea to get grandparents and grandchildren together. You know, it's one of those springboard sort of events. So you can go, Baylor had a good idea. Now I'm going to imitate it, but I'm going to tailor it to my institution's needs. So again, this is a good example of imitation being the sincerest form of flattery. You know, you can take these ideas and then really run with them and make them your own. Indiana Historical Society, this is an example of a much larger institution with statewide events. So the State Historical Society actually went out and did road shows across the state, and so not all of us are going to be big enough to do that, but again, we can take some of these big ideas and maybe just bring them down to our level and our size and what we're capable of doing, but they can still give you some really good ideas. And then finally, again, the Pasadena Digital History Collaboration. I should have said that outside before I put this slide up. Out loud, I mean. Has some really good ideas. So they did Preservation Week webinars through ALA, but then they had their own programming. So even if you're not a you know, actual bricks and mortar you know, physical collection sort of institution, you're all digital, you can still do a lot of fun things to really promote the collections that you do have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of come over and switch which screen I'm sharing for you so that you see, if I can get this to move over, so that you can see my other screen here where I have, way down at the bottom of course, the ALCTS Preservation Week website. And so what I'm going to do now is go and have Jessica, and now I'm not sure if I need to change presenters so Jessica can, so I can actually hear what Jessica is saying. Jessica, can you speak?
Can you hear me now? Yes, I am speaking, Danya.
Okay, great.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we're ready to start on the question and answer period then?
Yes, we are.
One thing I wanted to mention actually before we get into the question and answers is that for any institution or organization that's interested in what the Preservation Week webinars that are going to be presented for free through ALA will be, it's going to be moving image preservation as well as personal digital archiving. So those are two things that you could consider. But we'll go ahead and get started with some of the questions that came in prior to the webinar. So one that we have is this coming year, 2015, will be my first year to conduct Preservation Week. What are the initial steps necessary to initiate the Preservation Week activities?
Okay, great question. And it's a great first question. I love it because what it does is it will give me an opportunity to share with all of you what we have on the Preservation Week website to help you out. So first of all, you can see on the Preservation Week website, kind of towards the middle of the page, we have an event toolkit as well as a preservation toolkit. So the event toolkit has some very easy documents to actually help you plan your event. We've got some just easy, low-cost ideas to help you get started. And so if you take a look at that site, you'll find just a really simple list of ideas that you can then start with to build your own sort of program. You can also think about partnering with somebody. If you're in a larger urban area, maybe you're a smaller institution, and you've got, you know, a couple of other smaller institutions around you, it's a great way to not only promote yourself, but to also help promote colleagues in your area, as well as building up relationships between institutions. So it's a great way to really start to build something more than just a Preservation Week event, but collaboration between institutions for more than just that. We have ideas for programming throughout the year, lots of ways to help you get started. But if it really comes down to it, the first thing you want to do is, you know when Preservation Week is, come up with an idea. You know your community better than I do. And so what do you see as some of the biggest needs in your community in terms of preservation? Come up with your idea and then really just develop it. So, you know, develop your idea. You can use, I have just lost entirely my train of thought. You can use some of our ideas that we list here, but then we also have help for you in promoting your event. We have press kit ideas and publicity tools, and then we also just have lots of flyers and bookmarks that you can use to also put out to help promote not just Preservation Week in general, but preservation as a whole. So there's a lot of ways that you can get started. If you are in the United States, we have a speaker locator if you want to do a speaker. And so you would just click on finding the speaker, and it's going to take you slowly sometimes. This is the joy of doing some of this live, to the speaker locator page. And it's going to give you the opportunity to, in your area, find a speaker, if it ever loads. The event map is also a great way. Oh, I see we need to update our Preservation Week banner on our event page. Jessica.
I'm marking it down right now.
Jessica's on the committee, so it's good to get this information. So we have an event map and a speaker locator. So when you do plan an event, you can put it up here, and that's going to also help you see who in your area is doing a program. And if, for instance, you're at an institution in Wyoming, please do a Preservation Week event. It's so lonely there in that part of the country. You know, so help us also populate for events like that. So we really do try with our event toolkit to help you get started. If you're getting started is even more difficult because you're not quite sure yourself what preservation is, we have a preservation toolkit which has a lot of preservation facts and a lot of resources for institutions that probably don't have a preservation person on staff. And so this is going to give you the opportunity to get some of that information to be better informed to begin with.
Tanya, we just had a really interesting question come in, actually. Peggy's asking, what organizations are we partnering with at the national level? So her institution is applying to be a DPLA service hub, and might be a good, the DPLA tie-in might be a good one.
Oh, okay. Well, in terms of our partners, really ALA is the spearhead for Preservation Week. SAA is one of our partners. But then we also have a lot of stakeholders, and DPLA is one of our stakeholders, but they're not an active sponsor of Preservation Week. But it would be a great way, if you are part of the DPLA, that's maybe where you can partner to celebrate Preservation Week. And so if you're one of the hubs and you contact DPLA, it may be a great way to partner with them, because that would be a really interesting Preservation Week program, because in part the digital public library is, in a sense, a preservation activity in and of itself, but it's also something, on the flip side, worthy of being preserved. So you could really build a great collaborative program out of that.
And then we have a question about small libraries and archives. So because preservation work in small organizations usually has a very small staff, probably small to none, I'm slightly rephrasing this, how can I encourage other staff who are not necessarily in preservation to take part in and support Preservation Week?
This is where you can use some of the handouts that are available on the event toolkit. So what we've got some great bookmarks that are available for anyone to print out. Many of these are courtesy of the Library of Congress. And so what you can do is, everybody loves, things at the front desk. And so by having and printing out and having bookmarks at the circulation desk, not only are you engaging your patrons that come in and may pick up a bookmark, but you can also start to begin to have a conversation with a new department. So you can start having preservation conversations with the folks at the circulation desk. And that's going to be a first step. And then once you start to talk to circulation, who does tend to be kind of the first line of defense for anybody who works in preservation, circulation are the people generally who find the damaged materials and send them to you. Then you can start branching out and speaking to other departments within the institution that may also have interest in having preservation be a part of the institution. So you can go to, if you've got a department that just works acquisitions. A lot of the work that I've had in institutions that I've worked in has actually come from acquisitions, because they're the ones that unpack the books and find the damage to the new books that are coming in. Of course, if you've got a collection development department, they're going to be hopefully very interested in some of the things that you're doing. And so maybe if you are a small institution and maybe your colleagues aren't sure about what you do, then your first Preservation Week event or your Preservation Week event is going to just be an open house. And you can invite everybody to visit your department to find out what you do. And by just starting to engage with your colleagues and showing them what you do and explaining why it's important, you can start getting people on board. It's not going to be a fast overnight success, but just starting the dialogue is the first step, and then you can start to have more conversations after that.
So we have a couple of comments and a question as well, and I think the comments are really interesting. So Peggy is mentioning that she'd like to propose an event as part of outreach to cultural organizations outside of their usual reach, which I think is really a fantastic way to use Preservation Week.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and Kathy says, speaking of partnerships, mentioned that her library partners with the Main Street program in their town, and it helped them to bring in photographs to digitize. Which is
wow, fun.
Yeah, I'd never thought about the Main Street program. And then Kathy is also mentioning that their library will be in construction renovation, in a construction renovation phase for the next 18 months. So are there types of ideas that they can do to celebrate Preservation Week via their website primarily?
Oh, definitely. There's so much that you can do just between tweets and blog posts, and then depending on how sophisticated your web people are, or web person, or your web quarter-time person, whoever does it, you can also do an online exhibit if you were interested. And because you've worked with the Main Street Project before, maybe do you know, an exhibit of some of the images that you've been able to collect through that partnership to show people some of the wonderful things that have been coming in. And then because the library is not open, maybe you know, do the online exhibit, but then coordinate with another institution in town that might be able to be your bricks and mortar location to do another in-person sort of program, because by partnering with another institution, you're going to start bringing in different people because of the different associations that different institutions have within the community. So it might be a great way to expand on bringing in new images by targeting a different population than what you normally might do, or what you normally might have come in.
In a sort of similar note around types of ways to program, do you have some examples of Preservation Week events that might be suitable for teens or for college students?
College students are kind of tricky, especially for when we have Preservation Week. Because Preservation Week is usually the end of April and early May, that's quite often the time that most college students are starting to get a little bit frazzled. They've got finals coming up. But what I've found is a lot of institutions will do something fairly simple like blog posts or tweets, but then if your institution is already moving into kind of the library open 24 hours for studying for finals, you can tap into that, and maybe your Preservation Week program is taking some of the ideas from our videos or finding a great movie like, okay, it's maybe not the best in terms of preservation, but something like National Treasure, which highlights, original documents. I have my issues with it, but it is, a appealing movie. Have like a pizza and movie night for Preservation Week to really draw in the students. So kind of try to come to them according to what they're looking for at the time. So you could within the library have sort of events like that that might be a diversion for them. It's not, oh God, I have to sit through another lecture, but it's going to be something fun. And for students especially, having food is always a big draw. I know, food in the library.
Related to preservation.
It's, yeah. But, sometimes you can use it as a teaching opportunity. See, we're doing pizza in here and we're throwing it all away. We're not leaving it around the library.
So I actually have a question for everybody who's participating that you guys can maybe respond to while we go through some of the questions that we have from you. Have any of you already presented a Preservation Week event in previous years, or do you have one planned? And would you be willing to sort of talk about it a little bit, how it went? We'd be really interested to hear that. And I'll just keep going with questions while you guys think on that. We actually had a number of people who planned to participate who were from organizations outside of the U.S. And Danya, do you have any Preservation Week resources that might be useful for non-U.S. institutions?
Well, first of all of our Preservation Week resources are available on our ALA website, and they're available to anybody anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. But I would also recommend a lot of countries in their national library or their national archives have some great preservation resources. I know the British Library has a lot of really fabulous material, as do some of the larger museums. And so I'm not quite as, I will admit, I'm not quite as knowledgeable of the resources available throughout the non-English speaking world, because I can't always read and understand what the websites are saying. I can muddle my way through the French, but that's about as far as I get. But I would really recommend seeking out resources at your national libraries. If you've got larger academic institutions, they often have preservation departments, of course, and I have yet to meet anybody in a preservation department who is not more than happy to share what they do with outside people. So that might be another route to take. So also, if you've got any sort of national conservation institutes, so for example in the U.S. we have the American Institute for Conservation, there's the Canadian Conservation Institute in Canada, and again there are several of these around the globe. They also have resources, so it's always, I would always check with my, national library to see also what they have, because especially for tropical areas for Preservation Week, we don't exactly have a lot of advice for the tropics, in large part because we don't really have too many tropics in the U.S., so it's not something we've really focused on. So I hope that helps.
Great. And Peggy just mentioned that they share a warehouse space with the Maine State Museum, so in terms of a Preservation Week project. So they have renovation in process, and she's thinking of combining an open house to pull museum audiences as well as library audience, which is really awesome.
Fabulous, yes.
And then Kathy says, for the last 4 years, they've set up a display in the library celebrating Preservation Week. And again, in October for Preservation Month, yay. So it's brochures, publication, list of local conservators, bookmarks are available, as is a member of the local historical society on that Saturday for questions. And they encourage patrons to bring in photos and a flash drive, and they'll help digitize old photos.
Oh, great.
In a sort of a similar question, does the Preservation Toolkit include resources for digital preservation, which is maybe where we're going with digitizing the old photos?
The Preservation Toolkit in and of itself doesn't. However, I meant to open this up. There is, NDIP, which is and I can never remember what it stands for, the National Digital Information
Infrastructure, I think.
What's the P? Oh, Infrastructure Program. Oh, come on. And now it's not going to come up. The Library of Congress, which kind of then, and NDIP have a digital preservation toolkit in and of themselves, so it's not on the ALA Preservation Week website, and I'm not sure why. It may just be we haven't quite gotten around to putting it up yet, but I know under the personal digital, they've got a personal digital archiving day kit. So they have lots of information on the digital end, and I think we don't really have it on Preservation Week's website because they've got some great stuff, but I can't remember if we linked to it, which I don't see, so that might be something else that we want to be sure. They link to us, so we might want to be sure that we link to them.
I made a note.
Because they are some really good resources.
Cool. So, and again, on the resources topic, so there's the speaker locator on the ALCTS page. Is there, if they're interested in speakers on preservation topics or maybe conservation topics that fall outside of typical library archive collections, so maybe more like objects collections, is there some place they can go to find speakers for that kind of information, or where they might look to find speakers?
One of the places that you can go to is the American Institute for Conservation. So if your institution doesn't already have a relationship with a conservator for non-library and archival materials, if you go to the American Institute for Conservation's website, which is conservation-us.org, you'll find up in the kind of right-hand corner here a button that says Find a Conservator. And this is at least going to give you an idea of what conservators are available in your area. So say you are in Ballston Spa, New York. Strangely enough, that's where I am. And you're willing to have somebody come from maybe 50 miles away, and you really want to have somebody come in about textiles because your institution has a lot of people very interested in quilts. So you can then search, and it's going to bring up a list of conservators that are in your area within the, the mileage that you specified. And so then you can read not only about their specialties, but the services they offer. And one you'll see that you might want to look for is they've got a teaching and lecturing section. So the people on this list are professional associates and fellows of the American Institute for Conservation. And so you can, to be on the list, you click the services that you offer. So then you can always find those people who are interested and willing in going out and teaching and lecturing. And most conservators are going to do that. So that might be a way outside of your institution's comfort zone to maybe find somebody that could come in on a specialty topic.
Awesome. Actually, Felicity just sent me a comment, which I think is really great, mentioning that she is in an academic library and that displays of damaged books are really popular with the students. And some of her examples are water damage, books chewed on by animals, which I would be interested to see, rusted paper clips, things like this, and sort of showing a before and after with the repair is I guess, fairly impressive to students. So I think that's a really fun idea. Like, look what can go wrong and how you can fix it.
Well, one of the, and I can't remember, I believe, my mind wants to say it was an institution in Wisconsin, but I can't remember now for sure. But I remember talking to somebody who, not for Preservation Week, this was before Preservation Week got started, but to demonstrate for the students at the beginning of the academic year why the library had a no food and drink policy. They installed a mouse in an exhibit case with a book that had some peanut butter and jelly on it, and left the mouse and the book in the exhibit case. Now he got, he got cleaned, he got fed, but the whole point was to introduce the mouse to the book and have him start shredding the book. And it really was eye-opening for the students that a little bit of food is bad in terms of attracting the mice. Now, most people might not be brave enough to try that, but it was another really great eye-opening way to exhibit. Another good one is if you've got in your academic library one of the television monitors that kind of goes all the time. The University of Florida did a great YouTube video on cockroaches versus books. So you may want to check that one out too. It's kind of got the right gross factor for college students.
So if they're seeking sponsors for Preservation Week, do you have suggestions for types of companies or organizations that are most likely to participate in that way?
If you're looking for sponsors, the best thing is to think about businesses in your area, because you want to, the personal touch and the local touch is always going to be more meaningful. And so a great thing to start looking at is if you have any maybe auction houses, if you've got any, if you've got any industry in the area that maybe makes or distributes paper, maybe you've got small publishers in the area. You can think about some allied groups like that, but then never forget to have a little bit of a broader outlook and start maybe talking to the Rotary Club, your local ALCTS, maybe your local American Legion. Was it last year, Jessica, we did military families, or was it the year before?
Oh, I think it was last year.
Okay. But if you're going to do a program on, even family research, there's a large percentage of us that have had somewhere in our family trees somebody who has been in the military or fought in one of the wars, that, you know, if you're going to do a program geared towards that sort of information, they might be a good sponsor too. And you never quite know what's going to come out of some of these community partnerships, because especially something like the Rotary, you know, this is a group of the businesses in your community. It may result in sponsorships for other things that you do as well, not just Preservation Week. So again, it's who in your local community would be a good partner for the type of program you're doing, because those relationships can have long-lasting impacts on your institution.
That's awesome. We have a couple of more pre-sent questions, but if any of you attending have any questions, I do encourage you to type them into the question box. So we'll go through a couple more right now. Do you have any suggestions for how early to start advertising? And actually related to this, we had a question about marketing strategies to effectively market activities, which you've covered a little bit, but maybe you want to expand.
Yep. So many of us, when we're doing a Preservation Week program, especially if you're in a public library, a lot of your programming is laid out for the entire year. So pretty much what you want to do is you're going to start at the very beginning. So you're going to, oh, now I've got Julie Andrews going through my head. You're going to start with your annual calendar. You know, so have an annual calendar, essentially a save the date sort of thing. And then you don't want to start really promoting too early, because then people don't pay attention anymore. It's, oh, I've seen that message, oh, I've seen that flyer, and they start to ignore it. So maybe about a month ahead of time, you can start putting up flyers, or send it, you know, put up coming events on your website or your blog to let people know, and then really start promoting about 2 weeks in advance. You know, with maybe directed emails to any of your constituents. Maybe if you've got like around here in New York, we've got the Penny Saver, which is a free little community newspaper that goes out to everybody in the area. You can put announcements in something like that. If you've got community newsletters that go out, you can do that, but often the community newsletters around here are only quarterly, so that might not work. But if yours are more frequent, you can do something like that. Don't forget to tweet it. Don't forget to put it up on your Facebook page if you've got something like that. You know, and you can be creative if you've got some interesting images. If your institution has a Pinterest page, you can pin something about preservation. You know, it's what I can really recommend about marketing is to just really be creative and try to cast as wide of a net as you can. Again, that think outside the box of what you normally do, because if you start bringing in new people, those could become repeat customers for you. So, of course, always the genealogy clubs, but, you know, beyond that, depending on, of course, what your programs are, and maybe this is where working with other local community groups really come in. If you're doing something geared towards, you know, maybe military collections that people might have, then you work with the, you know, the American Legion or groups like that. If you're doing other sorts of things, maybe you get the Rotary involved in promoting it. Maybe you get the Elks Club involved in promoting it. For my community, you know, the Elks Club has the Wednesday night bingo games. And so maybe you talk to the Elks Club and they promote your Thursday night program at their Wednesday night bingo games. You just never know who you might draw in. So it's thinking outside the box and being creative. And building those community relationships. I can't stress that enough.
Well, speaking of building relationships, we just got a question that I'm thrilled with. Can you talk about what the ALCTS preservation and formatting section does, and are there ways to get involved or other organizations to join and get involved to learn more?
Well, if you are already a member of ALA, you can always join the ALCTS section, which is the Association for Library Collections and Technical Services. You can see why we shortened it to ALCTS. And that is where the preservation and reformatting section is. And it's a great way to just learn more about preservation. So at each midwinter and annual conference, there's the Preservation Administrators Interest Group that meets in person. And then there's digital, there's metadata, there's promoting preservation, smaller interest group within there. And then, of course, there's always joining, volunteering to be on the Preservation Week committee is a great way to learn, not only about Preservation Week, but preservation. But you can also think about just, if you're not a member, you can always sign up for the Preservation Administrators Discussion Group. You do need to be an ALA member, I believe, to be on the listserv. But there is a listserv for preservation administrators. But then there's also a lot of Facebook pages. So Preservation Week itself has a Facebook page. But then there are also the University of Iowa's Conservation Preservation Department has a regular Facebook presence. Duke University has a regular Facebook presence. There's a lot of institutions like that, so you can just start following some of what they're doing, and that's going to give you a lot of information. They also have blogs, so you can do the Facebook to find out more about what's going on their blogs. The American Institute for Conservation, NEDCC, the National Park Service, there's a lot of groups that do Twitter feeds, and so if you do Twitter, you can do those. But then there's also just a lot of great resources out on the internet. The National Park Service's conservograms have a lot of really good information, and then they also have the Museum Handbook, which, yes, is geared towards museums, but has a lot of really good general preservation information. NEDCC, if you want to learn more and have a little bit of money, NEDCC does essentially the equivalent of a semester-long course online called Preservation 101. You can always do that. And there's, so many other resources out there. All of there's so many, I can't think of them now all of a sudden. A general Google search will help you a lot. But I would start with the ones that I've told you about, and then you can start linking through to other groups from there.
Kathy just made a comment that actually I think you and I, Danya, should both consider and take to Preservation Week. Could ALCTS create a logo that has only the date and Preservation Week so that they can overlay it onto their own photos or artwork, since the color schemes don't always match our displays, which is actually a really good point. So I am making a note of that, and I will talk to them about it.
It is a great idea. I think in the beginning we were really more focused on the branding, so we didn't want to do that, but I think now, I think our name is out there enough now. People know it.
And I actually had my own question that I wanted to ask you. So I watched the webinar, and you mentioned preservation-related books that people might read for Preservation Week or in preparation for Preservation Week. Do you have any suggestions of what books might be worth taking a look at or are very preservation-related?
If you go to the Preservation Toolkit, you weren't on the committee early enough.
I know.
We have lists. We have both lists of fiction about conservation in general.
Oh, awesome.
Unfortunately, most of it is conservation. But we also have books about fiction or books about books for book groups. So, you know, we have, oh, why do you always open up over there? So we have, it's not perfectly up to date, but we do have a list of some books, and so this one is just books about books. But then we also have, thanks to the American Institute for Conservation, a list of conservation fiction. So not only novels and short stories, but also films or plays or television programs that you could also utilize in whatever sort of program you want to do. Now again, it's not perfectly up to date. I think the last time this was updated was 2013. At least once a year the call goes out, any new good fiction. So we try to keep it up to date. But those would be two really good resources to start with. So you can always check those two out for you know, maybe some good Preservation Week ideas, and that's another good one. If your library has a book club and the library kind of manages what the book club is reading, you could always read a book about some sort of preservation topic for Preservation Week. Yay!
Okay, well that's actually really exciting for me too, so now I have a reading list. Do we have any more questions? We have just a few more minutes, so
yeah.
Okay, we have a question. What are some of the overall goals for Preservation Week?
Well, when we first started, the overarching goal for Preservation Week was really to bring preservation information to the general public. That was really what our goal was. And we're actually getting better with that. But what we learned early on was that it's really hard to get preservation information to the general public if our colleagues in our institutions aren't really sure what preservation is. So it's been, even though it wasn't what we envisioned, it's been really great to see a lot of these academic institutions and larger institutions doing programming that not only appeals to the general public but also works within their own institutions to do education. So for example, the American Academy of Medicine in New York City does programming, and they set up in the lobby of the building. So it doesn't matter if it's the general public coming in or staff coming in and through. Everybody can learn about what is going on in preservation. I'm so happy to see that a lot of library schools during Preservation Week actually stream the videos. You know, so we're not only getting the general public and library staff, but we're also getting future library staff. I'm not quite sure why I don't think of library students as the general public, but they seem to be a world of their own. So really what Preservation Week is kind of morphed into is just, I guess when it really comes down to it, proselytizing about preservation to anybody and everybody who will listen to us. It's really, when you distill it down, that's what we're about. Because regardless of the type of institution that you're at, whether it's a library, an archive, or a museum, the more people know and understand about preservation, the better cared for our collections are going to be. A better informed staff means better care and handling practices within the institution. A better informed public means that the collections that we will be getting as gifts and donations will be coming into us in better condition. You know, hopefully, if they learn nothing else, storing their big rolled up maps in the barn to get covered in pigeon poo and eaten by the bugs is maybe not the best way to present it to the library of your choice when it comes time for you to clear out the decks. Yes, I'm actually cleaning pigeon poo and off of a map right now, so that's why it's so much in my brain.
This is because Kathy had one comment, which is really cool. They're getting gifts and donations directly, it sounds like, as a result of preservation education, and that is exactly what we want.
Yes, yes. Yes, and when you do programs like the Main Street Project, where you're inviting people to bring in their photos so that you can scan them and give it back to them as a scan, you're not only getting that digital image for the short term, but you're also building that relationship with that family to get those images, those original images, when it comes time to, when they're looking at donating things. So yeah, great way to build public relations.
Okay, well, we have just a couple more minutes, so I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up. If anybody has last comments or questions, or if you have questions later, you know, Danya will be available to respond to them. So, anybody want to type in something real fast last minute? Okay.
Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Felicity for some final closing comments.
Well, it seems like maybe we're having a little bit of an audio problem. So just one moment, guys.
Sorry, I unplugged the microphone while I wasn't speaking to make sure there was no noise. So, my apologies on that. I want to thank everyone for participating. This is a new format we've tried, this question and answer format. So we'll be very interested to hear what you think. So please, when you get the evaluation form, fill that in and send that out and let us know. I also want to thank the ALCTS Preservation and Reformatting Section's Preservation Week Committee. They're the ones who proposed this and pulled it together. And they're the ones who are pulling together the webinars that Jessica mentioned that we'll be having next spring during Preservation Week. Also, we couldn't hold these webinars without the ALCTS Continuing Education Technical Support Committee and the ALCTS staff. They're the ones who do the work behind the scenes. And those people helping us today are I-Ping Chen Gaffey, Mary Reeder, and Emily Whitmore. So thank you very much. So this was our last webinar for the fall. But coming in spring, we have a whole range of other topics, and some of those are up there on the screen. So those will be posted on the ALCTS website soon, so please check back for those. ALCTS also has web courses and e-forums. Those are other ways to learn more about information, and we're always interested in proposals, so please send those in. And let me just close by thanking Danya for for sharing more of your knowledge. It was great to reach this audience and really appreciate that. So thank you, everyone. We hope you participate in other continuing education offerings in the future.